Good evening. I'm John Allenham. He recently turned 95 years old and has been for Africa and the world a beacon of perseverance and struggle in a fight for social justice. But in the country that he spent his life fighting to unify, the fault lines of a post-Mandela reality are worrisome. Tonight, we take you to South Africa for a reality check on whether South Africans have solved the question of racial unity and whether the ailing Nelson Mandela could now, more than ever, be the glue that binds South Africa together. This is Perspective, and the show starts right now. Before we get into our main feature, let's crystallize a headline spun out of the recently ended teacher strike. Here's headline versus bottom line. This week's headline: Kenya National Union of Teachers Chairman Wilson Sossion and Secretary General Mudzo Nzili were each fined 500,000 shillings by the Industrial Court for contempt of court. The union itself was also fined 5 million shillings over the failure of its top officials to call off the teacher strike as directed by an earlier court order. But here is the bottom line. While Wilson Sossion and Nzili may have been in the middle of a standoff with the government when the court order calling off the strike was made, that does not absolve them of their responsibility to comply with court orders. The court was an independent arbiter in the issue and simply played its role as called upon when the dispute was brought before it. The union, Sossion and Nzili have a right to appeal the court's ruling, but ignoring a lawful order sets a bad precedent over the respect for laws in Kenya. That's headline versus bottom line for this week. When Nelson Mandela was taken ill last month with a recurring lung infection and hospitalized in Pretoria, the world's media rushed to South Africa and many around the world fell to their knees in prayer, fearing that the global icon would not emerge from hospital alive. Mandela, ever the survivor, spent his 95th birthday in hospital, defying all negative predictions about his death. Mandela's life and struggle will not soon be forgotten because it was he who embodied the best of Africa at a time when apartheid painted South Africa in its worst light. But stable as his condition is, South Africans now have to face the scary question of what happens when he does pass on. Is South Africa the fabled rainbow nation that Mandela dreamt of? Or will the bonds that he's famed for having created unravel as South Africa walks on without him? KTN's Asha Mwilu is just back from South Africa and debuts on Perspective, bringing us this sober report on the man and the legacy of Nelson Mandela.
I stand here.
The struggle here against apartheid, for freedom, Madiba's moral courage, this country's historic transition to a free and democratic nation has been a personal inspiration to me.
We're reminded of just how much pain and suffering he has gone through. People somehow forget that because he's an extraordinary man who has a very public face.
He's forgiven everybody, and he's actually equipped the people. They are capable of following in his legacy.
In Julius Caesar, one of William Shakespeare's great works, reads in part, "Of all the wonders that I yet have heard, it seems to me most strange that men should fear, seeing that death, a necessary end, will come when it will come." A younger Nelson Mandela signed his name against this passage in a fellow inmate's book while imprisoned at Robben Island in 1977. Facing death without fear appealed to Mandela like it did to most anti-colonial activists. The nostalgia carried in these words now echo as 95-year-old Mandela lies ill in hospital.
Nelson Mandela, Nelson Mandela, Nelson Mandela.
From the moment South Africa's iconic anti-apartheid leader Nelson Mandela was admitted to hospital with a recurring lung infection, the country almost simultaneously came to its knees. In prayer, in song, in tribute. But while the world exalted Mandela outside his hospital, right beside his bed, the closest people to him were far from at peace. Barely a month into his hospitalization, a raging feud had entangled the Mandela family. And it wasn't long before the family dispute over wealth and prestige overshadowed Mandela's health progress.
This battle over the burial ground of his children is distasteful.
The family tried to get an affidavit over a burial dispute, and they say their father was in a vegetative state.
South Africans are becoming quite upset about this what is now a very public dispute.
A closer look into this infighting, however, exposes Mandela's unstable and painful road in his personal life. By enduring 2 divorces and remarrying a 3rd wife late into his life, Mandela has reminded South Africa that even he is not a saint.
He always felt that he had a debt to pay to his family because he had in some ways neglected them, but he never tried to turn that into a monetary debt. It was a moral debt.
I'm sure many people, that is their wish. And I also have that wish that I spend more time with my family.
Whereas South Africans celebrated Mandela's first strides in abolishing apartheid in 1994 and establishing multiracial elections, his first wife, Evelyn, gave a blunt interview saying, "How can a man who committed adultery and left his wife and children be Christ? The whole world worships Nelson too much. He is only man."
I think there are many men of his generation and others who get married early and then find that they outgrow that relationship. And I think that with his first wife, they had less and less in common in terms of political vision, which he shared with Winnie. And I think that his marriage at the age of 80 to Graça Machel has been a wonderful thing.
Before ending their 13-year-long marriage in 1957, Evelyn had borne Mandela 2 daughters and 2 sons. One child died aged 9 months. With his second wife, Winnie, Madiba has 2 daughters. On his 80th birthday, he remarried to Graça Machel, widow of Samora Machel, Mozambique's president who died in an air crash. Mandela has a total 17 grandchildren and 14 great-grandchildren.
It's very important to me as a daughter to be able to uphold my father's legacy and get involved in any way.
Having been able to share him with this country, with this continent, with the world, it's really been, a bit overwhelming.
An overwhelming journey for all South Africans, one that has led the nation to best understand Mandela's strengths as well as accept his flaws. The legacy that will outlive Mandela is eminent throughout this country. It's in fact almost impossible to believe that just 2 decades ago, black South Africans were completely segregated from the white population.
As it stares at the possibility of Nelson Mandela's death, what are the challenges that today's South Africa faces? That's up next on Perspective.
As a foreigner, when you get to Johannesburg, most South Africans that you meet want to take you around the city, show you museums and monuments that tell of the history of the apartheid period, take you to places that tell of the stories of their liberator and father of democracy, Nelson Mandela. But the more time you spend here and the more you interact with South Africans, the more you see the disparities between social classes and different races. And the more you realize that most South Africans are not content in their current government. And so one question lingers in your mind. Is South Africa really living the dream envisioned by Nelson Mandela? A national survey last year showed that South Africa's population had hit 59 million. 79% of this population is black. The survey also revealed that the income of a white South African household is currently 6 times higher than a black one. From Pretoria, where a vigil for Mandela's health outside the hospital continues, to Soweto, which embodies the rich history of the anti-apartheid struggle, everyone is drunk with the Madiba spell. But when you take time to indulge these personalities closer, you meet the other side of South Africa. How is the transition? Do you think now the leaders now are carrying forward the good governance that Mandela has?
Not yet. Not yet. Not that best. Because they are still fighting for the seat. Still, we don't know what is going to happen after this. Because some, they don't want this one, they want this one, they don't want this one. We don't know.
Are you worried about what South Africa will be in the future after Mandela is gone, maybe?
Yes, we are worried because we don't know what is going to happen. Because now the people, they start, we don't want this one, we don't want this one, we don't want this one. You saw there is no communication. It's lacking the communication. So, we don't know. Now they are a little bit scared because they know that I'm still alive. Yeah. But after this, everybody wants to do his own things.
Mandela has been the glue that has kept South Africa together during the transition from apartheid into a multicultural democracy. And to many, he is still that glue even 16 years after his retirement from politics. Merilil Wate's level of confidence in the current government represents how most black South Africans feel. In Houghton, Johannesburg, a first-class suburb where Mandela's main house sits, there is a more subtle approach to how tributes to the ailing leader are pouring in. It's here where we meet 68-year-old Colin Robin. Just like his age mate Meryl from Pretoria, Colin witnessed the ugly period of apartheid, though from the opposite side of the spectrum.
It was nothing less than absolute cruelty. And they were jailed, the sentences. It was really in the most horrible era to think that blacks weren't allowed any, I don't even say privileges, similar to the whites, they weren't allowed any privileges whatsoever.
A man's legal status, a man's political rights, a man's economic opportunities, a man's social position shall depend solely upon the color of his skin.
Never and never again shall it be that this beautiful land will again experience the oppression of one by another.
But according to Colin, Mandela's vision of tolerance has been under threat.
Unfortunately, I'm just giving my opinion, there's a lot of dissension among the races, which is unfortunate, and it was definitely not his wish.
That will never stop, to be honest, even though we celebrate what we call Freedom Day and whatnot. It's never going to stop, because until today, white people still think that they're superior than black people, and black people despise white people.
Asha, we will not be intimidated by people who seek to say that the ANC has not tried to cross the racial divide. You must understand that the ANC's fundamental objective is to create a non-racial, non-sexist, democratic South Africa.
The ANC, South Africa's ruling party and the movement that liberated the country from apartheid, is by the day becoming less popular among the people.
Our houses are leaking. When the rain is falling, we put buckets and washing taps to avoid the rain in the house.
And President Zuma, do you support him?
No. I voted for Zuma. I'm sure it's about 2 years back, so I had to retire for voting.
Why?
There's no support. He's only supporting outsiders, like Zululand.
The tragedy about South Africa at the moment is that we suffer from very poor leadership. And that's particularly unfortunate because we still have great leadership in this country who are not in government at the moment, who were trained during those years of ANC struggle. So one thing we really, really hope for, and the vision that Mandela offered us, was a vision of true leadership. And we really have to try to come together as a nation and understand how we can elect leaders that really are invested in producing democracy in this country.
A majority of South Africans attribute the high poverty and unemployment levels to what they claim is unending corruption in their government. In the year 1999, when Nelson Mandela was completing his one and only term in office, South Africa was ranked at position 34 by Transparency International in its Global Corruption Perceptions Index. Last year, during President Zuma's reign, South Africa was ranked at position 69 by the same survey. This means that in the 13 years between Nelson Mandela and Zuma, South Africa has dropped 35 positions in corruption levels.
If you walk around Soweto today, you'll see urban development. It really is part of a world-class African city. So more than 3 million houses have been built at no cost to the individuals who occupy those houses and hold title deeds today. You know, the number of young children who are in school, we're close to the 100% mark. So there have been numerous successes of this government. What we will never shy away from is that there's still a lot more that needs to be done.
Mandela's vision was to have an equal multicultural country where tolerance and mutual respect take to the fore. His vision was that South Africa would have good governance through free and fair elections. And most important, that the nation would always remain united. South Africa will experience its ups and downs, just like many countries in Africa. But even the most pessimistic of the South Africans we've met say Mandela's vision will always guide the nation towards striving for prosperity.
What I've learned from Madiba is that Madiba is a patient man, you see, and he's loving and he's forgiving.
He is the one that has made me who I am today.
I feel proud to be South African. It inspires me to be more and to make a change and to be a history maker, because he is a history maker.
We do think that there was something extraordinary about this man, and that he was able to pull the history of this nation out of a mediocre authoritarian place into something resembling a future, something resembling a democracy. And I think that we feel tremendously grateful for that.
I have cherished the idea of a democratic and free society in which all passions live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve. But if need be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die.
That's it for this week's edition of Perspective, but the conversation doesn't have to end here. You can tweet us on our show handle at KTN Perspective, or tweet me on @JohnAlanamu, or leave a comment on KTN's Facebook page. As always, we look forward to putting your week in perspective. Same time next week. I'm John Alanamu. Good night.